we are meeting at the same time for our online session, but only difference is actually today's our online meeting is pre-planned, in the sense I'm not presenting lively today, or it's not a kind of a live presentation today. This is a recorded session. Since I'm unable to attend on time on Saturday, so I have made some arrangements to pre-record it. So today I will be not asking any questions from you, and you will not have any chance to respond. But let's try to make it interactive as much as possible. I'll allow you to do some brainstorming, allow some thinking in terms of our discussion. But as I said, I'm not expecting any answers from you today. Now, today we are talking about interest rates and the financial system, which is one of the important components or the variables in the financial system, interest rate. Now, I remember last week I told you to look at some of the important developments this week. In the sense, I asked you to look at the monetary policy review, which was scheduled to be announced on 9th July. And I asked you to look at the monetary policy decision, the rationale, and related, press release with all this information. I'm not so sure whether you got some chance to do that, but let me take this discussion in the next week on a live basis. So I kindly request you to look at the monetary policy review again. So go to the central bank website. There you will see under the latest news, the monetary policy review number 5, 2020, that is in July. It was issued on 9th July, actually yesterday. So read this monetary policy review. It's a kind of a press release statement, and try to figure out some of the important facts. So basically you can look at three things there. So I expect you to look at these three things, and let's have a discussion next week. So what I'm expecting, basically, you can basically look at the monetary policy decision. That's the first thing. Monetary policy decision means what really has happened, whether the monetary policy has been relaxed, tightened, or how the way it has been tightened or relaxed, the usage of tools. So that is the first thing. Second thing, what is the rationale behind why the monetary policy was changed, or what factors have been considered in the monetary policy decision? So that is one thing. Third thing, I want you to look at the monetary policy press release and give some forward-looking thoughts. In the sense, in the monetary policy review, what you see as some guidance, some expectations about the future. So those are the three things. So I'll put it on the board so you won't forget it. The first thing, hope you can see it. Monetary policy decision. Second thing, rationale. Third, outlook. These are the three areas that you need to look at, and let's spend some time next week to have a discussion on the monetary policy review. Okay, that is really important, not only because of the exam. Being a financial sector participant, even as a student, you should know what's happening in terms of monetary policy, because that is really important in the economy. one of the important things in the economy, affecting a lot of financial as well as economic variables. I think I discussed last week in a detailed manner. I hope you remember what we have discussed. So based on that, we need to have some clear idea about monetary policy development. So let's do that next week. Now let me turn into the discussion today. Now today, as I mentioned, we are talking about interest rates and the financial system. Now interest rates we are discussing just after the discussion of monetary policy, because if you recall, the discussion on monetary policy is basically on the cost and the level of money. Level of money means money supply, cost is basically interest rate. So we are bringing this interest rate discussion today. We have already covered money in detail. Interest rate is basically cost of money, and today we are focusing on the other element of the monetary policy actually. Okay, so what is interest rate? Very simply, interest rate is the price of money. Price of money. What do you mean by price of money? Now, in the financial system, we know money is for different or deferred method of payment. Deferred method means you use money today as on the basis of a loan, and you settle that at a later stage or in the future. For example, you borrow, let's say 100,000 rupees from a person for today's consumption or today's investment, and that money you will be returning to the lender in the future. So the payment is deferred until the future. So when you settle that in the future, we can just say the deferred method of payment is basically fulfilled. Now you are borrowing money today and spending it and settling it tomorrow, which means the money you are utilizing today is settled in the future, because you basically use it today, right? For the purposes I mentioned, investment or the consumption. Now that money has a kind of an opportunity cost. Opportunity cost means you basically use it today by foregoing or by sacrificing some of the activities that you can do today. For example, let's say you borrow money and you use it for something else, and you are sacrificing some other opportunities. Let's say you are investing in one asset, you're sacrificing other assets, or you are using it for consumption and you are basically sacrificing other investment avenues. So money has some opportunity cost because you are using for something else, and where you can earn some interest also if you make an investment. Now for that matter, when you are settling money in the future, at the future date, you have to basically settle that money with a rent. So for the usage of money, you have to you have to pay a rent today. So that rent is simply a kind of a price. You call it a price. So why do you say price of money? You basically you spend money by paying a rent. That rent is simply the interest rate. So very precisely you can say the price received by the supplier of money, in the case of our example, the lender of money, the price he receives in the future, or the price paid by the user of money, that is basically the lender, sorry, a borrower, he basically pays a kind of a rent or the price for the usage. So all in all, it's simply the opportunity cost of money or the rent of money that you pay for the usage of money. Okay. Now, why interest rates are important in the economy? Now, interest rate, as I said, for monetary policy purposes, that is simply the other element of monetary policy in our definition. Now, it's really important because it is the key macro variable deciding the savings and investment in the economy. Now, if you simply look at the income function of the economy, in a simple economy, the income function would be, simply Y plus C plus S, which means income is spent in terms of consumption and savings. This savings actually is the source of investment in the economy. So investments are happening based on the savings. Now the savings and investment both are a function of R. Function of R. R means in economics, R, sometimes we use I, both indicate the interest rate. So interest rate is the key variable deciding the savings and investment. Usually, savings are a kind of a function of investment, interest rate by way of having a positive relationship, which means when the savers see higher interest rates, there is a tendency that they save more. For investments, it could be other way around. There's a negative relationship, which means when interest rates are high, investments could be low. When interest rates are low, interest rates could be, other way around. If interest rates are higher, investment could be low. If interest rates are low, investments could be higher. So both are functions of interest rate, which means it decides, both are functions of actually savings and investment. It decides the savings level and the investment level in the economy. So we can call it allocation of resources. In the economy, resources are simply allocated because based on the interest rate. So interest rate decides whether a particular amount of funds to be allocated for savings or the investment. And in that case, interest rate is affecting the consumer spending. So in this simple equation, Y equals C plus S, the consumption is determined by looking at the the interest rate, which means when interest rates are higher in the economy, people, as I said, there could be tendency to have more savings. So that affects the consumption or the consumer spending. So where we see some, interest rates are picking up in the economy, there could be slowdown in the consumption because people want to earn more, or earn a return using the interest rate. And I already mentioned central banks are using interest rate as a mean of monetary policy. In monetary policy equation, we saw both the level of money and the cost of money is there. So the cost of money is basically the interest rate is the direct tool to the central bank, to the monetary policy maker. Why it is direct? Whenever the central bank can changes interest rates in the economy, the impact will be directly felt by the economic variables. So the transmission from interest rates to interest rates is quicker than transmission from quantity based variables to interest rate. So as a result, interest rates are considered as very important for monetary policy. Now today in modern context, most of the central banks, their first preference is to use the interest rate tool in their monetary policy conduct. Interest rate is also important for the government. Why? The governments are simply borrowers in the economy. They are net borrowers. Most of the governments, their revenue is lower than their expenditure, which means governments are running budget deficits typically. So that budget deficit is basically financed by debt, either foreign debt or local debt, domestic debt. So both debt components are dependent on the interest rate. So when the government sees high interest rates, that is basically driving their borrowing cost up. So governments, they would like to have lower interest because of the borrowing cost going up with the changes or increase in the interest. Finally, interest rates are important because that affect all financial markets and prices. We saw last week also, I very briefly mentioned, when interest rates are changing, the financial market is responding. For example, when the central bank is changing interest rates, that rate change is reflected in many other markets: gold market, government securities market, bank lending market, bank deposit market. In all these market segments, you will see some responses. Similarly, when interest rates are changing, the prices of financial markets, you can call it asset prices, they are changing. For example, when interest rates are going up, bond prices are declining. Right? So when interest rates are going up, the share prices could go down. Likewise, there are some impacts of interest rates on other financial market prices or asset prices. So in that case, we really need to have a attention to interest rates as a key variable in the economy. Sorry. Right. Now, how the interest rates are determined in the economy? Now, interest rate is basically the cost of money, as we already know. In that case, interest rates are simply a kind of a price, as we already know, and that price is an equilibrium price in the economy, equilibrium price in the market. So what is this equilibrium price? Basically, the interest rates are determined through the supply and demand conditions in the economy. Now, supply and demand conditions in the economy means simply supply for funds. Now, to explain this, we can rely on two basic theories. So here in this slide, I have highlighted two basic theories. One is supply and demand for bonds. That is one way of explaining the interest rates. One theory. The other one is supply and demand for money. So in the bonds market, the first analysis, simply you call it the traditional way of examining interest rates, is dependent on demand and supply for bonds. Bonds means financial instruments in a broader scale. So demand for financial instruments or the bonds dependent on some key factors. Income. When you have more income, the demand would increase. When returns are increasing, people would demand more bonds. When risk is increasing, probably people would reduce the demand for bonds. When liquidity is increasing, demand is increasing for bonds. So all these factors, income, returns, liquidity, they are having positive impact on the demand. So whenever these factors are changing, the demand for bonds would change. Similarly, the supply side, the supply is basically the availability of the bonds in the economy. So that is dependent on changes in investment opportunities or government activities, mainly government activities. Why I told you the reason, the government is the net buyer of money in the economy. They want to have funds for their investment, for their budget financing. For that matter, the government is issuing bonds. That's why you call it the supply. So by issuing governments, the government is borrowing from the market. So the supply and demand in the market, in the bonds market, when it becomes an equilibrium situation, there you will have the interest rate. So I can simply draw that here. So this is a very typical demand supply curve. So this is demand for bonds. This is supply for bonds. So interest rate is simply here the quantity of bonds, interest rate of the bond. So this is simply the equilibrium interest rates determined in the market. So that is one way of explaining the interest rate, the determination of interest rate. The other, as I mentioned, the supply and demand for money. Now, in this case, if you look at very simple framework, if the demand is increasing, let's say DB1, the interest rate would increase to 1. If demand declines, DB2, interest rate would decline. Okay. Similarly, if the supply changes, interest rate would vary. Okay, so it's very standard demand supply analysis. The other theory is the supply of money and demand for money would determine the interest rate. Now in the economy, the demand for money is simply a negatively sloping curve, right? Demand for money, DN. That is dependent on people's income and the price level. So when income goes up, this demand could go up. The other factor is supply of money. Supply of money. That's simply a vertical curve. Vertical curve means that is simply determined by the central bank. Monetary policy, remember, the monetary policy will affect this curve. If monetary policy is relaxed, this curve will shift to the right. If monetary policy is tightened, this curve will shift to the left. So the changes in monetary policy will change this curve, otherwise no. So there you will see the equilibrium interest rate, right? So when the money supply changes, equilibrium interest rate would change. If the demand curve changes, equilibrium interest rate would change. Likewise, interest rates are determined in the market dependent on the supply of money or demand for money. So the first part, the bond market, as I said, the traditional way of analyzing determination of interest rate. The other part is the Keynesian analysis. Keynesian analysis. I think we met this Keynes when we were talking about money supply. The same person. So he presented this Keynesian version of interest rates, where the interest rate is determined based on the demand for money. Actually, if you recall the past discussion, it's actually demand for real money balances, because this should be basically adjusted for prices. So simply the real money balances. And on the other hand, supply for money, which is dependent on the monetary policy. So that is the basic framework or the basic concepts in relation to interest rates. Now let's move to some of the concepts related to interest rates. Now these concepts we find in finance here and there, time to time, based on our discussion also time to time. We will use these concepts in the future discussions. So we need to have some clear idea about as to what are these interest rates and why they are important. Okay? So we basically focus on 4 types of interest rates here: the simple interest rate and the compound interest rate. That is one kind of a pair. The second pair is nominal interest rates and real interest rates. Both are very important in the economy. So let's start with the simple interest rates and compound interest rate. Now, the simple interest rate means it is interest calculated on the principal value of a loan or a deposit. So let's say the loan is 100,000 or the deposit is 100,000, and from that principal, if you take a percentage as the rent for the loan or the deposit or the return for the deposit, as a percentage of this principal value, interest rate, let's say 100,000 into 5%. So the 5% is the rent that you are going to pay or the return that you are going to earn. So by multiplying the principal by the interest rate, you can get the simple interest rate or the simple interest component of your money balance. Why it is simple? It is not compounded. Why it is simple? It is basically the stated interest rate. Stated means the published, the presented interest rate. Whenever you go to a bank, the bank will tell you the simple interest rate. That is basically the stated rate. And as I said, it is not compounded, and depositors will gain something on their principal, that is their interest income. The borrower will pay something, that is basically his the rent for money. Now, usually what happens whenever you have these interest rates, they are not that simple. For example, if you borrow money, you are not simply paying a simple component of interest rate, which means you basically borrow 100,000, 5%. You are not simply paying 5%. What really happens, whenever the time passes, there will be some accumulation of the interest rate. If you borrow, you pay accumulated interest rate. If you invest, you receive accumulated interest rate. That is simply the compounded interest rate. Now, in this slide, we have highlighted what is compounded interest rate. It's basically a method to calculate interest where interest earned over time is added to the principal. Or if you are paying, it's basically, let's say you default 1 month, then it will be added to your the loan amount. So compounding. In Sinhala, you call it Walpoly, right? And that is simply adding the interest component to your loan period or the deposit period. Now, in this example, now let's say we have an investment of 10,000 and your simple interest rate is 10%. So based on this simple interest rate, what you will get every year, let's say you deposit this for 10 years, every year based on the simple interest rate, you get 10%, 1,000 every year, right? So end of the period, you get 10,000. Every year, simply you get the simple rate on your principal. But what really happens, over the period, if you are not taking back that interest component, let's say this 1,000, that you are reinvesting. Reinvesting means that will be added to your initial deposit. Let's say in the second year, you get 1,000 based on your 10% rate. So let's assume you are not taking that money and you are reinvesting that 1,000 for the next year. So in the next year, out of this 1,000, you are getting what? Basically, you get additional 10% for that 1,000. That's it. That is 100,000. And sorry, it's not 100. That is 100. So you already get 1,000 and another 100, which means for the second year you get 1,100 as your accumulated interest rate. You can think it this way also. For example, you invested 10,000. In the next year, you get 1,000 and you reinvest it. And altogether now it becomes 11,000. For 11,000, what you earn is 10%, which means 1,100. Imagine that 1,100 is also reinvested. Now your new deposit value will be 12,100, and out of that 10% will be 1,210. So likewise, going forward, every year you get an accumulated interest rate. So accumulated interest rate at the end of the period will generate you 15,937 for your 10,000 value deposit. So whenever you accumulate or compound, it is always higher than the simple interest rate. So at the end of the period, you have the principal sum plus compounded interest rate, principal and the compounded interest rate. So it is always higher than the simple interest component that you earn. Now you can easily compute in finance. You don't need to do these, long tables to find out this. You can simply use a formula for this purpose to calculate the principal sum. So in this formula, the P1 equals 1 plus R divided by N, here NT. So the P plus means the new principal sum through this compounded value you get. P is the original sum. Let's say in this case, what you invest as 10,000. So that is your principal amount here, 10,000. 1 plus always 1. R means simply the interest rate. So in this case, 10% divided by N means number of periods. So in this case, number of periods, 10 periods. So divided by 10 multiplied by NT means again basically the time period. The compound actually the time period is T. This N means simply the compounding periods. Now here in this our case, compounding period is 1. Basically it's annual. Now imagine in this case, let's say interest is paid every half an year, every 6 months. So if it is every 6 months, this N becomes 2. If it is every 4 months, N becomes 3. If it is every 3 months, N becomes 4. If it is every monthly, N becomes 12. So it's the compounding frequency. So here I have given you the definition. P is original sum, P1 is the new principal, R is the nominal interest rate, N is the compounding period, T is the overall loan period or the deposit period, in this case 10. So by using this formula, you can calculate either, let's say you are given the new amount and you can calculate R, or you are only given R, you can calculate the new principal, either way. So it is simply applied to calculate the accumulated interest rate or the compounded interest rate. Now, related to this idea, in finance, there is a concept called effective interest rate or effective annual interest rate, EAR, effective annual interest rate. How do you define it? Interest rate that is actually earned or paid on an investment due to compounding. Now here, in this case, interest rate is 10%, but actually you are not earning 10%. Due to compounding, you are earning more than the 10%. So that is simply the idea of effective rate. Effective means always the return you generate or the cost you generate through compounding. Now here I have given you the formula to calculate the effective annual interest rate. That is simply 1 plus I means interest rate, it could be R in some case, divided by N, and here you have the number of N periods again. So N means we already know the number of periods, right? In the previous case, here we define it as the compounding periods. So here we can call it number of periods. So the same thing. For example, if it is monthly, it could be 12. If it is semi-annually, it could be 2. Likewise, the frequency here, not the long tenor, right? If it is long tenor, it should be T. But here the compounding periods. Now, to get it understand clearly, here we have an example. So in this example, let's say you have an investment. The investment A will pay you 10% compounded monthly, right? Which means N equals 12. And the other investment B, it will give you 10.1% compounded semi-annually, which means N equals 2. So which one is giving you the more higher benefit? Investment A or investment B? So you can do some calculation and see. Investment A, if you apply this formula, 1 plus 10% divided by 12 power to 12 minus 1. So the answer will be 1047. Investment B, again 1 plus the interest rate now 10.1 divided by 2 because that is semi-annually, power to 2 because it is semi-annually, minus 1, you get 10.36. So by looking at this, you can see investment A is giving more returns than investment B. Investment B is giving only 10.36. Investment A is giving you 10.47. So obviously A is higher. So the message here is whenever you compound with a higher frequency, your return will be higher. Compounding every month will generate higher return than compounding 6-month basis. So if you take 4 months compounding, it should be in the middle between 12 and 2. So the return you earn would be between 10.47 and 10.36. So the message is clear. When you compound more and more, you generate more and more returns. That is applicable in the case of a paying a loan. Let's say you are paying a compounded interest rate. That is again when you compound, probably you might be paying more than you apply a simple rate. I hope it's clear. Compounding and simple interest rate. The other idea is nominal and real interest rates. Nominal, I think I have mentioned to you in the previous sessions also. Nominal means simply the stated interest rate which is not adjusted for inflation, not adjusted for prices. If any variable is nominal, that is simply inflation impact is included. If you say nominal GDP, that includes the price changes, which means price inflation is there. If I say nominal investment, that is investment in monetary value. The price change is there. So nominal value always includes the price change. Real value means without price change. Why do you need real value? To see the actual performance of a variable, you have to have the real value. The best example is GDP. Now GDP, let's say GDP can grow by 20% nominally. That 20% has two components. One, the real growth and the nominal growth. Let's say the real growth is only 5. Nominal growth is 15 because of 15% inflation. So altogether, nominal growth is 20%. Right? If I tell it again, if you take the nominal growth 20%, that includes, let's say, real growth 5%. Another 15% growth is coming from price changes, the nominal change. So altogether, 20% is the nominal growth. But if you break it up, you will see that 20% is not actually 20%. Why? It was driven by high prices. So the real growth is only 5%. Similar case for the interest rate. So interest rate, let's say 15%, if you take as the nominal rate, in that 15%, you can have 5% real rate and 10% price impact, inflationary impact. So very clearly, the nominal rate includes inflationary impact, real rate excluded or excluding interest rate, excluding the price change, which means adjusted for prices. To understand that, we can use this Fisher equation. In this case, R equals the real rate. R means now we are basically giving R as real rate. Earlier we used ROI for both rates, whatever the rate. But here now we are focusing more. We are learning very clearly now. R is the real rate. So real rate equals the T means the time, right? Current time. I is the nominal rate minus E. This term is basically phi, Greek phi. E phi means expected inflation. So T plus 1 means in the future, expected inflation in the future. The nominal rate minus expected inflation equals the real rate. Now in reality, in practicality, we don't have the expected inflation. It's really difficult to monitor. So in real cases, we can take inflation as the variable. So let's say we cut this out. Right? So you can simply define real rate as R equals I minus phi, which means inflation. So let's say I is 12%. Inflation is 5%, which means the real rate means 12 minus 5 equals 7%. Okay. So based on that, you can derive either R equals I minus inflation, or I equals R plus inflation, whatever the way. So here we can have an example. Why don't you look at this example to get some understanding about the real rate? Maybe I'll give you a couple of minutes to think about the answer. Then we will go into the discussion. Right? Think whether you can find out an answer for this question. A bank pays an interest rate of 15% per annum on a fixed deposit. That 15% is the nominal rate. Okay, the bank pays that amount on the FD. What is the amount of interest you get if you deposit 100,000? And if inflation is 10% during the year, what will be the real rate? What is the additional amount of money you get in real terms? I think very simple, straightforward. So the first part, what is the amount of interest you get if you deposit 100,000? 100,000 into 15%, the nominal rate. 100,000 multiplied by 15% means 15,000. Answer is clear. Second part, if inflation is 10% during the year, what will be the real rate? If inflation is 10%, how do you calculate real rate? It's very simple. A real rate equals, here, look at, real rate equals I minus inflation. The box is basically the inflation, right? So here you have to write it, inflation. There's no such letter as a box, but it should be inflation. 5, this 5. Right? So I minus 5 means simply 15% minus 10%, which will be the real interest rate. How much? 5%. So the real rate is 5%. So what is the additional amount of money you get in real terms? What is the additional amount you get? If real rate is 5%, the additional return you get above inflation is what? 100,000 multiplied by 5%, which means 5,000. So it's very clear that 5,000 is the real gain. That the 10,000 that you earn is nullified by inflation. So that 10,000 is not actually there in 1 year's time probably, because it's eroded due to inflation. But the additional 5,000 due to real rate 5% is really there. So that adds to your purchasing power. That increases your purchasing power. So the real rate is important for us because that gives some idea about the purchasing power of money, right? So when inflation is higher, the purchasing power will erode. When inflation is lower, purchasing power will be higher. When inflation is lower, purchasing power will be higher. So in that case, the real rate is really important for us to understand whether you are actually earning or gaining due to an investment, or whether you are actually losing from that investment or from a loan even, because it could either be negative or positive. If inflation is higher than the nominal rate, there you get a loss. If inflation is lower than the real rate, nominal rate, there you get a surplus in terms of positive real rate. So that is really important in finance. Now, related to this nominal and real interest rate, there's another concept called the Fisher effect. Fisher effect. Fisher effect, simply we define here also this one, the same thing. I equals R plus phi. R means the real rate, phi means nominal, inflation. In our previous case, I equals 15%, R equals 5, we already know, phi equals 10%. So that's how this 15% is created, 5 plus 10. Now, according to Fisher effect, the argument is there is 1-to-1 relationship between inflation and the interest rate. There is 1-to-1 relationship between this 5 and I, interest rate. When phi is going up, I could go up. Right? That is the argument of Fisher effect. So as long as inflation is going up, this nominal rate is going up because inflation is driving the nominal rate. Real rate could be the same, or it could even change with the inflation rate is basically remaining unchanged. If the nominal rate is changing, the real rate could also change. But here the idea is there is a one-to-one relationship between the nominal rate and inflation. That is the idea. Okay. So that is all about different concepts of interest rates. Simple interest rate, compounded interest rate, nominal interest rate, real interest rates. So those are different concepts related to interest rates. Now in the next part, let's look at different levels of interest in the economy. Now in the economy, as we know, probably you may have also observed, there are different interest rates in the economy. In the economy, you have basically bond rates, bill rates, and bank rates, coal market rates. Likewise, there are various interest rates. And these interest rates are having different values. For example, the bond rate could be 5%. Bill rate could be 4%. Bank rate could be let's say the bank lending rate 6%. Coal market rate could be 4%. Likewise, there are various interest rates. Why, if the central bank is only having one policy rate, why can't we have common interest rate in the economy? So there are various levels. Why is that? We need to understand the reasons. For that matter, we use this risk and term structure of interest rates. So under this risk and term structure, what we do is we try to understand why financial assets or funds, loanable funds, have different interest rates in the economy. Financial assets and loanable funds, why there are different interest rates. So that is the argument here. So here we can explain these different interest rates. Why the reason is we can explain using some conceptual or theoretical discussion. So here we look at the risk structure of interest rates. So that is one reason, one way of looking at these differences. The other way is term structure of interest rates to understand the differences in interest rate. Now, the idea is very simply the interest rates of different financial assets are different because the differences in risk or differences in the maturity or the term. Now let's go to the details. So here we have risk structure of interest rates. What are we saying here? Financial instruments, let's say bonds, with the same maturity. Let's say we have 10-year bonds. All are same maturity, identical maturities. So which means theoretically the rate should be the same for all instruments. Let's say we have many types of bonds. If the maturity is the same, ideally there should be same interest rates, but it's not the case. If you look at these interest rates, they are different because of different risk levels. Interest rates are different because of different risk levels. Why there could be different risk levels? Here I have highlighted 3 factors. One thing, the default. Default means an investor basically might, not the investor, the borrower might not pay back. Let's say the borrower is issuing bonds now. He issues bonds and raises money, but he never pays back. Default. Let's say a person is basically borrowing through a bond and that bond becomes default, do not pay. So which means there could be a risk. For that risk, you have to price. And there are some differences in liquidity. Liquidity means the tradability. Some are not that tradable. Some are very highly tradable. And taxes. Some bonds are taxable. Some bonds are not. All these are leading to differences in the risk structure. Different risk levels are there. So as a result, interest rates could be different. Interest rate could be at various levels. So in this chart, I have an example. This is for US economy. In the US economy, let's say they have bonds, different bonds, all are same maturity. Let's say all are 10-year bonds issued for 10 years. So those 10-year rates are here. Yields means the interest rates of the bonds. Yield rate, what you earn. So these yields are given over the period 1920 to 2010. The evolution of yields are given. Now, if you look at these different lines, yield lines, all are not identical. All are having different levels. Now, for example, the green line is simply the state and local government bonds. So they are having low interest. The thick green line is US government long-term bonds. They are also having low interest compared to the red line. Red line means corporate bonds. AA bonds means very good bonds. It is lower than the other bonds. BAA bonds are having higher interest rates compared to the red line. So if you look at all these four lines, the blue line has the highest interest rates. Corporate BAA bonds. BAA means triple B with some lower rating, high risk category. So their interest rates are higher. Government bonds are the most safest, which means government never defaults. So in that case, you can have a smaller risk premium for government bonds. So as a result, their rates are low. So the risk structure is giving you different interest rate levels because of the risk. Okay? Higher the risk, you have higher premium. Lower the risk, you have a lower premium. That's why government securities are having low interest rates, whereas corporate debentures or corporate bonds will have higher interest rates because of their high risk. Okay, the other aspect, term structure. Now in this case, term structure means here let's fix the risk. Let's say these bonds are having the same risk, same liquidity, same taxes. Same risk, same liquidity, same taxes. But still, there could be differences in interest rates. Even though these factors are similar, interest rates could be different because of the maturity is different. Maturity means the duration of this bond, how long will it take to mature, right? Now in this chart, we have 3-month bill, 20-year bond, 3 to 5 year bonds, let's say. Now 3-month bill, the green line are the short-term instrument. So short-term means in 3 months time, it will be maturing. So their rates are very low. Whereas the 20-year bond, the red line, very long term, not so quick, the maturity will be in 20 years. So you bear a higher risk. So when you have higher risk for the investment period, you have to pay an additional premium. That's why you have high interest rate. So I think it's clear, because of the risk, interest rates are different. Because of the maturity differences, interest rates are different. Okay, so that's the reason, although we have interest rates determined by the central bank, the benchmark, in the economy we see a lot of different interest rates because of the differences in risk and the maturity. So this term structure gives us another tool in finance. So what is this tool? Yield curve. I think this is a very important term, yield curve. Yield, I already mentioned to you what you earn out of your investment. So this yield curve is basically coming from the term structure. Term structure, we know identical bonds with same risk, same liquidity, same taxes will have different interest rates. So here in this chart, we have presented this term structure. Now on this chart, the horizontal axis, you have 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, 2 year, up to 30 year different maturities. On the vertical axis, you have 0.5, 1 plus 1, 1.5, likewise interest rates. So if you plot the interest rate and the maturity period for a particular bond or series of bonds, let's say you get 3-month bond and their interest rate, you plot it here. 6-month bond, its interest rate, plot it here. 1 year bond, interest rate, you plot it here. So the actual interest rates are plotted against their maturity. And when you connect those points, you get a curve like this. Let's say the black curve here, the June 2009 curve. So that is simply the yield curve. And you can do this yield curve, that yield curve, you do it at a particular point in time. Let's say the yield curve in June. Likewise, you can do yield curve in July 2014, July 2020, likewise. So if you plot all these yield curves, you will get, curves like this, different curves. All these curves indicate the movements of interest rates in the economy. Now in this chart, what we can simply say, compared to 2009 June, the black line, in June 2008, interest rates have gone up. Why? The blue line is above. And compared to June 2009, interest rates in March 2009 was slightly lower. Why? The curve is below the black line. So likewise, you can, by looking at the curves, you can say whether the interest rate structure has gone up or gone down, whether there is an upward shift in the interest rate structure or whether there is a downward shift in the interest rate structure. You can simply get some idea by looking at the movements of the yield curve. And we also much concerned about the slope of the yield curve. There are yield curves upward sloping, which means the curve like this, where you have short-term rates are low, long-term rates are higher. Then it's an upward, you call it a typical standard yield curve. Or there could be a flat yield curve, which means both short-term and long-term rates are similar. Even though there are maturity differences, no rate differences. And more importantly, there is another type, inverted curve. Inverted means short-term rates are higher, let's say here. Long-term rates are lower, let's say here. So if you draw a line, it is a negatively sloping curve or an inverted curve. Why it is important? Inverted yield curve gives some idea about the future of the economy. Whether the economy is going to have a future expansion or not, you can identify by looking at the yield curve. So if the economy is normal, in the future we see economy will expand. When economy is expanding, interest rate could go up. So as a result, you observe a normal yield curve where you have an upward sloping curve. Let's say you expect a recession in future. In recessionary situation, short-term rates will be higher, long-term rates will be low, because in the recession, inflation would be low and interest rates would be low. So the yield curve would be downward sloping. So in the market, people consider yield curve as a guiding indicator about future interest rates and future economic activity. Say it again. Yield curve is an indicator of future interest rates and economic activity. So if economic activities are good in the future, yield curve would be upward sloping. If interest rates are going to be high in the future, yield curve would be upward sloping. If economic indicator performance is going to be low and interest rates going to be low, that will be basically a downward sloping yield curve, right? So I think you have some idea about the yield curve. Now, before we move to the next part, we should have some idea about interest rates and returns. There is a difference between those two. Now, we already know interest rate is the cost of money, cost of funds. Return means how well a person will be better off by holding a financial asset. Say it again. Interest rate is the cost of money. Return is how well a person will do in terms of asset, holding an asset over a period of time. So that return will have two components. What are the two components? That return will have the cash he generated out of his investment, as well as the appreciation or the depreciation of the value of the asset. If it is a share, if share prices go up, there is an appreciation. If it is gone down, there's a depreciation. So that appreciation and depreciation you can calculate as a percentage. That percentage and the cash payment that he get, if you express that as a total value out of your purchase price, that is simply the return. Now, I'll be bringing this back later on also, but for you to keep it in mind, very simply, interest rate is simply, we know the cost. We already know. Return, let's put it this way, return is simply the cash income you get plus capital plus or minus capital gain as a percent of purchase price. Purchase price. So that is simply the return. Now, we know interest rate could go up, returns also could go up. Now, when returns are going up, that indicates you are generating more cash, more capital. But capital change. But what is the logic behind? There you have risk. So when risk is increasing, return could increase, like in the case of interest rate. So what I want to highlight here, there is a clear difference between the return and the interest rate. Okay, I hope it's clear. Now let's move to the next part quickly. Interest rates in Sri Lanka, because we need to understand these interest rates for our future knowledge, for our future discussions also. Various interest rates are there in the economy, as I already mentioned to you, because of the risk structure and the maturity structure, term structure. So in the economy, the basic interest rates are the benchmark rates that is decided by the policy makers, which is the central bank. And then you have average rates for the industry, which means for markets, for banks, there are various rates in the economy. So let's look at these rates one by one quickly. The policy rates. and the operating target of the central bank. Right? Policy rates, I already mentioned to you, is determined by the central bank. Determined by the central bank. What are these policy rates? Under our monetary policy discussion also we discussed. So I'm giving you the idea again with a definition. Okay. First one, standing deposit facility rate is DFR. Standing deposit facility rate. What is the definition? That is basically the rate at which commercial banks deposit excess funds with the central bank. The rate at which commercial banks deposit excess funds with the central bank. So I already mentioned to you last week, the policy rates is a corridor. So in this corridor, the lower rate is the SDFR. So in this shaded area, the lower bound is this DFR, which is the standing deposit facility rate. SLFR, standing lending facility rate, which is the rate at which commercial banks borrow from the central bank to fulfill their funding needs. The rate at which commercial banks borrow funds from the central bank to fulfill their funding needs. So in this corridor, that is the upper bound. So in the shaded area, the upper line is basically the SLFR, which is the borrowing rate. The lower bound is simply the deposit rate for commercial banks. I hope it's clear. So whenever the central bank changes monetary policy, this corridor is changing. Whether the corridor is going up, going down, indicates the movements of monetary policy. Then we have the bank rate. That is also a policy interest rate of the central bank. Now, for many years, the central bank did not use this rate. It was there, but it was not used actively. Right now, the central bank in 2020, during pandemic period, they have changed this rate after, I think, nearly 20 years. Right? Earlier, it was 15%. Now, it was brought down recently during the pandemic. So, what is bank rate? So, that is the rate where commercial banks borrow from the central bank as the last resort in a financial crisis. That is the rate that the commercial banks borrow from the central bank as the last resort in a financial crisis. So there you simply giving money to commercial banks to resolve their liquidity issues. These rates for short-term cases. This rate could be for long-term problems, right? So all three rates are policy rates of the central bank. I have not put it here in this chart because it's a constant rate. For many years, it was flat at 15%. Now only it has come down, okay? And the other important rate for the central bank is the operating target of the central bank, AWCMR. AWCMR, write down the full term, it's already given here, average weighted cold money rate. Average weighted cold money rate. So what is this rate? This is the rate where commercial banks borrow and lend in the cold money market. Commercial banks average rate of borrowing and lending in the cold money market. Cold money market means a short-term market to fulfill short-term funding needs. So banks borrow, lend in this market without any collaterals, without any securities. What is the importance of the central bank? For the central bank, it is the operating target. Why? If you look at this red line, the central bank is managing this rate through its operations. So by open market operations, which means by putting liquidity or absorbing liquidity, central bank can influence this rate. How? When there is more money in the system, central bank absorbs then you will maintain this rate stable. When there is shortage of money, central bank injects, then you can maintain the stability of this rate. That's why you call it an operating target of the central bank. Central bank can operate it. Then you have treasury bill rates, which are the rates for government securities. So in this chart, we have put 3 month, 6 month, 1 year treasury bill rates. There are movements. Why there are some broken areas in this chart? Because in some cases auctions are not conducted. This is basically primary auction rates. We can also have secondary market rates, which means once the primary purchase is done, investors buy and sell securities in the secondary market. In that market, we can identify rates, and you can plot it as the yield curve. Remember, I mentioned the yield curve. You plot the rates against their tenor, and you can identify the movements of interest rates. So this is our secondary market yield curve. By looking at the yield curve, you can say compared to 2019, 2018 rates were higher because the red line is high, the blue line is low. So earlier the rates were higher. In this slide, we have rates for market, which means for the bank lending and deposits. Bank lending and deposits. So the banks are the dominant players in our economy. They are the key category of the financial system, and their transactions, borrowing and lending with the customers, create loans and deposits. Right? For those loans and deposits, there are various interest rates. Now in this slide, I have put these names: AWPR, AWLR, AWNLR, AWDR, AWFDR, AWNDR. So there are roughly 6 interest rates in this slide. Okay, and you will see the movements of these rates. Ideally, you can understand these lower rates are deposit rates. Higher rates could be lending rates, right? By looking at the chart. But we need to understand these definitions. Now, these definitions I'm not going to give you now. Okay. Instead, you have a homework. What is the homework? Take the chapter 7 of the annual report of the central bank and read the interest rate part. In that part, you have the definitions for these interest rates. Remember, take the annual report, chapter 7, section on interest rates. So there you have these information. Okay. So please get the annual report chapter and try to locate these definitions. So that is some homework for you. Okay. Let's see whether you can do a good job in terms of finding the definitions. And there are other interest rates in the economy, the legal rate or the market rate. Both rates are identical. If you look at this table, you will see both are the same rates, legal rate and the market rate. But both rates are published by the central bank for the purpose of court cases. Court cases. What do you mean by court cases? In the case of a default, when you go to the courts, the court will consider these rates. When a particular borrower or a lender, when he has to pay, they have to look at this legal rate or the market rate. Same rates as I mentioned. Why there are 2 rates? 2 rates are coming from 2 different acts. One is Civil Procedure Code. The other one is Debt Recovery Act. So based on these 2 different acts, you can have different definitions, but the rate is the same. This is applicable for court cases. And also international markets, you have interest rates. I think I discussed this to some extent in the last week also. Fed funds rate. This is the most important international interest rate. What is this rate? Like our SDFR of the central bank, the US Federal Reserve, the central bank of US, giving money to the market participants when when the market participants are basically undertaking actions with the central bank, this rate is applicable, Fed funds rate, right? For example, uh, there are two rates actually. The base rate is actually what you observe in the market, and there is a other rate called target rate. Target rate is basically announced by the central bank, right? Here I have given you the target rate that is basically announced by the central bank. Based on that target rate, market is doing activities. That activities you call it base rate, activity base rate. Okay. So this is an important benchmark in the interest rate structure in global markets. Why? That determines the entire global interest rates. Whenever the central bank of US, the Federal Reserve, changes this interest rate, that will affect all the interest rates across market. Now, recently, we have seen that interest rate was basically increasing before the pandemic. After the pandemic, you will see that has reduced to very low levels. For some time, it was near zero during the financial crisis. Now, again, it has come down to near zero, right? So, it's a very important rate. Then you have interbank offered rates of the London market. You call it LIBOR, London Interbank Offered Rate. This is an indicative average rate for a panel of banks. So there you have a number of banks. Here you only have in the target rate only Federal Reserve. Base rate you have different banks. Here in the LIBOR you have a panel of banks. So if you take their panel and their average rates, what is the rate that they are going to lend? The willingness is captured by this LIBOR rate. So that is calculated for 7 different maturities, which means overnight up to 12 months, and also for different currencies, because in the London overnight market, many currencies are traded: American dollars, British pounds, European euros. Likewise, many currencies are traded. Different currencies have different interest rates. So here in this LIBOR market, the rate is capturing the willingness of banks to lend. So again, that also came down recently with the impact of the crisis. Earlier, during the financial crisis, it came down to very low levels in this period. Now, after the pandemic, it has come down in the global market. Now, this slide, I just put it to get some understanding about our monetary policy cycles. This is for Sri Lanka. As we all know, monetary policy cycles are dependent on the interest rates. So when interest rates are going up, let's say this red period, you have tight monetary policy. When interest rates are going down, you have this relaxed policy. Why interest rates are going up? If you look at this chart, the red line is picking up, which means inflation is picking up. Why interest rates are low? The red line is going down, which means interest rates are going down. The inflation is going down. So depending on the movements of inflation, whether it is going up or going down, interest rates are going up. This black line and ash line, our policy interest rates. So if you look at those rates, when inflation is going up, those rates are going up. When inflation is going down, those rates are going down. So depending on those rates, ups and downs, we can define these red periods and green periods, where you have simply the monetary tight periods and monetary relaxed period. Last slide, importance of these rates for banks. Interest rates are affecting financial market prices. We already know it. I mentioned to you a couple of times. And also that is affecting financial institutions, especially banks. Why? In their balance sheet, their activities are dependent on interest. interest is the main income for financial institutions, especially for banks. So their profitability in terms of their margin means the spread between the deposit and the lending rate, and their asset return, which means for their investments they have an return, they are also affected. Interest cost, they are also borrowing from others, they borrow by offering various instruments. So through these margins, investments, borrowings, the bank's balance sheet is affected. So banks are very much concerned about the interest rate. When interest rates are going up, banks are watchful. When interest rates are going down, banks are watchful, because that is the main variable that is impacting the banking sector, right? So this is the discussion that we have today. And as I said, there are a number of questions here. These questions I mentioned to you a couple of times. You have to know numbers actually. Now, numbers, I'm not going to discuss today because you have a task, two tasks. What are the two tasks? The first thing, look at the monetary policy review, and based on that monetary policy review, you need to come up with the things I wrote down on the board, right? Remember, it's not there now. I told you the decision, the rationale, and the expectation outlook. That is the first task. Then you will know the current interest rates also, policy rates. The second part of our activity is I gave you different interest rate names. You need to find definitions for those, and current rates, you should have some broad idea. When you read that press release, you will see the current rates also to get some feeling. For example, if you want to borrow, if you want to make a deposit, you should know what are the current rates. So those current rates are available in that monetary policy press release. So my request to you, go through and come up with some answers next week. Okay. So I'll stop at this point, and we'll see you next week with this interactive session. And also we are moving to a new discussion in terms of financial institutions next week. Okay. So have a good weekend and good week, and let's meet on a live basis next week. Thank you.